الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. We're going to study today, my dear brothers, the most important subject that you're ever going to study in your life. More important than your salah, more important than jihad, more important than dawah. In fact, it is known as the mother of all obligations. Imam Abu Hanifa, when he described this topic, he said, At-Tawheed, it is fiqh al-akbar. Fiqh al-akbar, it is the mother or the highest or the peak of any sciences that you will ever study. Ilm al-Tawheed, the knowledge of Tawheed, will help you to understand who is Allah, who is your Lord, what's His rights over you. Ilm al-Tawheed, my dear brothers, is the purpose for why Allah Azza wa Jal, He sent the Messenger Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where He said in the ayah that we have sent to every nation, وَلَقَدْ بَعَثْنَا فِي كُلِّ أُمَّةٍ رَسُولًا أَنْ اعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ وَاجْتَنِبُوا الطَّاغُوتَ. Allah Azza wa Jal, He said we sent to every nation a Nabi, a messenger, asking the people to reject Taghoot and to believe in Allah. The problem nowadays, my dear brothers, is when we talk about At-Tawheed, there's a problem of definition. A problem of definition of two words. A definition of the term Islam and definition of At-Tawheed. So what do people say Islam is? People say Islam means peace. Comes from the root word salama. Where when we say the Islam comes from the root word istislam, which basically means submission. The definitions now, we talk about definition of Islam, means submission. Istislam. Istislamun lillahi tawheedan. Istislam to Allah, submission to Allah. And Tawheed. Tawheed, people they say it is derived from the word wahda, or unity. If I describe a car to you now, and there's a car, I say a car, it has a particular engine, and the understanding of the term car, or the meaning of the word car, is unity of parts. They're going to say this guy's mad, he doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. How the hell can he say a car is unity of parts? No, a car is a vehicle, it's more accurate. Tawheed itself, the word is not mentioned within the Quran. Tawheed in itself, the term, it means al-ifradullahi bil-ibadah. Al-ifradullahi bil-jami' azza wa jal fi af'alihi, fi asma'ihi, fi sifatihi. Al-ifrad means exclusivity. The exclusive submission, worship to Allah azza wa jal in His asma, in His names, His attributes, and His af'al, in terms of His lordship. So in terms of two aspects we're talking about Tawheed now. Tawheed means submission in His lordship and in His worship. In terms of ilm of Allah Azza wa Jal, the ilm of Allah Azza wa Jal, in terms of His Zat Allah, in terms of knowing Allah, who is Allah. So okay, I've asked the brothers, if I ask you now, Allah, is He one or is He two? He's one. In terms of His lordship, in terms of His worship, should be one as well. So in essence, when we say Tawheed, the Tawheed, your mind should go to Al-Ifradullahi bil-Ibadah, complete submission to Allah Azza wa Jal, sovereignty for Allah Azza wa Jal. That's why we say, Amantum Billahi. Amantum Billahi, we declare our belief in Allah Azza wa Jal, sovereignty for Allah Azza wa Jal. Sovereignty for Allah Azza wa Jal alone. But our problem now is, people talk about Tawheed as just some theoretical subject. People say Tawheed, just to believe in Allah. So people, they will say, Yaki, what are you talking about Sharia for? Aki, you're making fitna by saying, for example, the rulers are kafir, for example. Or you're making fitna by calling for Islam as a complete system, as a complete way of life, or trying to liberate your Muslim lands from occupation. Tawheed is the mother of all obligations. Because of the Tawheed, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, I've been ordered to fight the people until they testify la ilaha illallah. Because of Tawheed, he sent Mu'adh ibn Jabal to Yemen. He said, let the first thing be that you call to la ilaha illallah, call to Tawheed Allah. And then if they establish that, then they pray the salah, then they pay the zakah, and then they establish the siyam and the hajj and so on and so forth. The Tawheed, it has three foundations. We can call this Asul ad-Din for Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. And this is the best comprehensive definition given by Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah. He's a scholar from the 7th century and one of the good scholars of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. So anything which I quote to you today is going to be, Allah said, the Messenger said, with the understanding of the companions, but elaboration with the ulama who follow those companions, the Sahaba. We don't need to go why we need to follow the Sahaba, because I think you guys got that by now. All right. The best comprehensive definition of what are the foundations of At-Tawheed. I'm going to give you 3 points of what he said. Then we're going to go to what Sheikh Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab, he came much later after that, and he confirmed in his book Usul al-Thalatha with answering he mentioned 3 statements with regards to what are the 3 fundamentals of Islam. I will show you how the 3 fundamentals of Islam, Usul al-Thalatha, are directly linked to what Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah said. So what's the first thing he said? He said the foundations of Islam are, number 1, al-istislamu lillahi tawheedan, total and absolute submission to Allah Azza wa Jal exclusively. Total and absolute submission to Allah. Secondly, he mentioned al-inqiyad lillahi ta'atan, the total and absolute obedience to Allah Azza wa Jal exclusively. So what's the first thing he mentioned? Submission and obedience. Istislam, which is submission, and obedience, which is known as at-ta'a, obedience. Secondly, he mentioned, because these 3, my dear brothers, you can see now, we're already entering into a zone which is very, very difficult for some people to swallow. Many people, they can't swallow this topic of At-Tawheed. When they study Tawheed, study Rububiyyah, Uluhiyyah. We are going to study the first pillar of At-Tawheed, Al-Kufr bit-Taghut. We're going to elaborate what we mean by a pillar of Tawheed. So the second one we mentioned is the total absolute obedience to Allah. Thirdly, he mentioned Al-Bara. Al-Bara min al-Shirk wa ahlih. Complete disassociation from shirk wal mushrikeen. The shirk, the association of partners with Allah Azza wa Jal, and the people of the mushrikeen. So what's he saying here? What are the 3 foundations of this deen? Our whole deen is based, our whole foundations of Tawheed is based upon what? Number 1, submission to Allah, obedience to Allah, and to have disassociation from shirk and the people of shirk. Tawheed wal bara goes hand in hand. But what's the middle part? The middle part which is going to distinguish Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah in our time from those Murjiyah today is what? Is that obedience to Allah. Do we obey Allah or do we obey somebody with Allah? Can we tolerate obedience to somebody kafir, murtad, and at the same time obey Allah? Can the 2 coexist for us in our heart, in our iman? It cannot. Those foundations have also been mentioned by Shaykh Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab in his treatise known as Usul al-Thalatha. And here we will see from his explanation of the 3 principles, he's elaborated and he's actually affirmed what Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah. Those 3 foundations which he spoke about is based upon the questions of the grave. The questions of the grave is, who's your Lord, who's your messenger, and what's your deen? He said the following. Number 1, if you're asked who is your Rabb, then reply, Rabbi. My Lord is Allah, who has created and sustained and nurtured me and all the creatures of the universe by His grace and bounty. Allah is my only object of worship, and I have no other object of worship besides Him. Now, what does this do? If we say those 3 pillars were A, B, and C. A was submission, B was obedience, and C was shirk. Then what this does is it affirms A, which is belief in Allah's Lordship, and B, which is the worship of Allah Azza wa Jal. So submission to Allah Azza wa Jal, it begins by how? By affirming, you are my Rabb. And then submission occurs how? Obedience occurs how? By obeying His commandments. By obeying when He says pray, you pray. That is Tawheed al-Ibadah. So Rububiyyah and Uluhiyyah is affirmed by the first statement of Shaykh Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab, where he said, if you ask who is your Rabb, this affirms those first 2 points which Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah he mentioned, which is Tawheed is submission and obedience. So we say the first question of the grave, if answered correctly, it affirms function of the heart. Your heart must recognize Allah exists. And not only Allah exists, but Allah is the one who is not just the one who exists, but He's the Rabb. He's the one who sustains. When we talk about Tawheed al-Zat, when we study next time, Tawheed al-Rububiyyah hopefully, we're going to study the Zat of Allah Azza wa Jal. We're going to discuss the proofs for the Zat of Allah Azza wa Jal. How He is the Rabb. Where is the proof for Tawheed al-Rububiyyah? It's a big topic. And then secondly, actions of the limbs. So the first one is actions to do with the heart, and then second one, action of the limbs, which is Rububiyyah, Uluhiyyah. Then he's mentioned secondly, and if you're asked, what is your deen? Then reply, my deen is Islam. My deen is Islam. And look to what he said now, because many people, they study this book inside the mosque, but they don't elaborate and they don't explain this. He said, my deen is Islam, which is submission to Allah. What part of Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah's statement does he affirm here? Who can answer that? A, B or C? B. It affirms ta'a, obedience. Then he mentioned sincerely making Allah. He's still on the second one now. He said sincerely making Allah the one and only God, following His law in obedience and absolving and disassociating myself from shirk and the people of shirk. Which statement of Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah does that affirm? Not D, there's no D. C. C, yeah? Which was what? Al-bara min al-shirk wa ahle. Then he mentioned, if you ask who is your Nabi, then reply Muhammad ibn Abdullah ibn Abdul Muttalib ibn Hashim. Hashim was from the Quraysh, and Quraysh was an Arab. Arabs are the descendants of Ismail, the son of Ibrahim al-Khalil, the chosen beloved one of Allah Azza wa Jal. Now, I'm going to quote to you now from another book, and this book you can't get anymore because the brother who produced this book, he's in Belmarsh prison now. This book is called Wajibat al-Muhtahimat al-Marifa ala kulli Muslim wal Muslima. This is a book by Sheikh Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab, banned in fact inside Biladul Haramain. It's a book by Sheikh Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab and been elaborated by his grandsons. The book in English is called The Foremost Obligatory Duties about which every Muslim and Muslimah must have knowledge. And what here Sheikh Abdul Wahhab, he mentioned two fundamentals of the deen of Islam, which again now, this affirms what Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah has already laid down. So I don't think any of us have got a problem with Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah. He said it is submission to Allah, obedience to Allah, bara from shirk and the people of mushrikeen. He said number one, the command to worship Allah alone who is without peer or partner. A lot of peers nowadays. He goes, this includes encouraging and promoting His exclusive worship. Yeah? Making His worship the sole basis for friendship and alliance, and declaring as a kafir those that leave it. You know what this affirms? It affirms A, B and C. It affirms Allah is the Lord, He is the only one worthy of worship, and I've got nothing to do with the mushrikeen. That's the da'wah of all of the Anbiya. So people say, Aki, call for Tawheed. So why don't you call for this type of Tawheed then, innit? This is the Tawheed of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This is the Tawheed of the Sahaba and all of the Anbiya. And then he mentioned the second point. He said, the warning against shirk, and this includes being stern in the condemnation of shirk, taking as enemies all those who commit shirk and declaring them as kuffar. These two fundamentals, my dear brothers, they are directly in correlation with what we're going to study today, known as the arkan of Tawheed. Arkan of Tawheed, it is known as the pillars of Tawheed. The pillars of Tawheed, which is based upon the statement, our shahada, which is what? What's our shahada? La ilaha illallah. Not like just La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. Some people, when you ask them, La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah, what's the two pillars of at-Tawheed? First of all, let's ask the question now. Do we worship Allah and the Prophet? No. We worship Allah. Okay? So Tawheed, in the Shahada, it consists of only this statement. La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah. What does that mean? La, there is nothing to be worshipped except illallah. The word ilah comes from, we can say, ilah means al-ma'bud. Al-ma'bud is the one who's worshipped. So Allah Azza wa Jal here, He's giving us al-nafi and al-ithbat. Negation, la ilaha, there is nothing to be worshipped except Allah Azza wa Jal. Yeah? So here we can see there's a separation now. You must give up the false gods, and then you can believe in Allah Azza wa Jal. Otherwise, if you don't give up, what happens if you just worship Allah? Say, I believe in Allah, I worship Allah. You'll end up associating partners with Him. Now, this ifrad, which we spoke about now, or when we talk about the net effect of al-ifrad now, the net effect now of worshipping Allah Azza wa Jal, which will mean this exclusivity of worship of Allah Azza wa Jal, it will have three particular pillars. There's three pillars in the worshipping of Allah Azza wa Jal, yeah, or three components of the pillars of worshipping Allah Azza wa Jal. So let's just break down the topic a little bit more easier for you to understand. What we need to study in Tawheed. We need to study first negation, affirmation. When we study affirmation, we need to understand that part of affirmation has, or Islam, has three particular components. We're not talking about classification. I believe in Allah is one. But there's elaboration of worshipping Allah by understanding He has names, attributes, functions. Classifications of Tawheed are unlimited. I'm going to explain what is classification in the next seminar. Classification can mean Tawheed Rububiyyah, Tawheed Uluhiyyah, Tawheed al-Asma Sifat. But when we talk about establishing the two pillars of Tawheed, establishing rejection, we'll understand that today. But what about when I establish my worship of Allah Azza wa Jal? It is based on three matters, and you can write this down. Number one is known as Al-Idrak. Al-Idrak, it means total understanding of Allah Azza wa Jal. Totally understanding Allah Azza wa Jal. Allah said in the ayah, فَأْلَمْ أَنَّهُ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ. So know about La ilaha illallah, know about your Lord. Al-Idrak, total understanding. Secondly, Al-Ifrad. Al-Ifrad means exclusivity. And thirdly, Al-Iqrar. Al-Iqrar means submission. So what's the three components of the Tawheed? For you to have proper belief in Allah. Number one was Al-Idrak. Secondly, Al-Ifrad. Thirdly, Al-Iqrar. Al-Iqrar, having complete submission. So total understanding of Allah Azza wa Jal. Total understanding of Allah Azza wa Jal. Total exclusivity in His worship and submission to Him. This is how you're going to believe in Allah Azza wa Jal. Because like I said, Tawheed, the word is not mentioned in the Quran. Neither is the word Tawheed Rububiyyah, Uluhiyyah, Al-Asma Sifat. But we need to study them in order to know about Allah, so how we can worship Him. Before we can learn how to worship Him, we need to know what we need to give up. And that is the Rukunayn of Tawheed, or the Arkan of Tawheed, negation and affirmation. This is what we can call At-Takhalli Qabla At-Tahalli. Negation, Al-Kufr min dunillah, then Illa Hasriya. Give up before you take up. Al-Ifrad, we say, is exclusivity. What's the opposite then of Al-Ifrad? Opposite of Al-Ifrad is known as Ishraq. Ishraq means partner. We don't want to make shirk in Allah Azza wa Jal. This is known as Al-Ishraq. Shirk comes from the word Ishraq or Shurakat. Shurakat is like partners. Or when two people come together and they form a company, this is known as Sharaka. Sharaka means like a company to come together. So Allah is one, and I believe in Him as one, and I worship Him as one. Notice I'm only using one finger. Well, I start doing 1, 2, 3. You say, what? There's 3 though. 3 goes into 1, 1 goes into 3. Becomes contradiction. We'll go at the topic then. Yeah? So we say the opposite of Al-Ifrad is Ishraq or Shurakat or Sharaka, but we don't want to make any shirk in Allah Azza wa Jal. But Allah, He is La Sharik Allah. He is without any partners in His names, attributes, functions. So He is La Rahim illallah, La Ghafur illallah, La Hakam illallah. All of His names, attributes are exclusively for Him. Al-Nafi is negation. And we need to know where is the evidence for this. From all of this, what I've just explained to you, we can derive the principle, La ilaha illallah is based upon giving up, then taking up. Well, how do you give up? Or where is the evidence that there must be these two pillars of Tawheed? Baqarah 256. Chapter 2, verse 256, Allah Azza wa Jalla said in the ayah, La ikraha fi din, qad tabayyana rushd min al-ghayy, faman yakfir bit-taghut وَيُؤْمِنْ بِاللَّهِ فَقَدْ اسْتَمْسَكَ بِالْعُرْوَةِ الْوُثْقَى لَمْ فِصَامَ لَهَا وَاللَّهُ سَمِيعٌ عَلِيمٌ. Allah Azza wa Jalla said, there's no compulsion in the deen. Verily the right path has become distinct from the wrong path. The wrong path is known as Al-Ghayy. Al-Ghayy is the wrong path, or the wrong path means deviation and misguidance. So whoever he disbelieves in Taghut and he believes in Allah, he has got the firmest handhold. He's got the firmest handhold, and it will never break. Yeah, it will never rupture, it will never separate. And Allah, He is Sami'un Alim, He is the all-knower and all-seeing. Al-Urwatul Wuthqa, we mentioned this term before, previously. Al-Urwatul Wuthqa was based upon our previous studies, where we said Kalimatu Taqwa, Kalimatu Tayyibah. Remember we mentioned Kalimatu Taqwa, we mentioned Kalimatu Tayyibah, where we mentioned what is the Sahaba, what did they have talazum with, and we mentioned the Shajara of Islam. Al-Urwatul Wuthqa, when we talk about, so Allah is saying, there's no compulsion in the religion. Those who give up the false gods, then they believe in Allah, they have got Al-Urwatul Wuthqa. Al-Urwatul Wuthqa is the knot that will never break. Abdullah ibn Abbas, Abdullah ibn Masud, in the tafsir of this ayah, they said Al-Urwatul Wuthqa, it is La ilaha illallah. Yeah? So Allah Azza wa Jal, He mentioned, what did He mention now? He's mentioned rejecting Taghut. disbelieving in the Taghoot, and then believing in Allah Azza wa Jal. So as a clarification and confirmation, he's mentioned now, Sheikh Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab in Majmu' at-Tawheed, he's mentioned, no, that a person can only remain a true believer by declaring disbelief in Taghoot. And the evidence for this is when Allah says, whoever rejects a Taghoot, then believes in Allah, then he has got al-urwatul wuthqa. So this is Sheikh Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab explaining to us what is Tawheed. He's saying there's no true Tawheed until you make al-nafi, rejection of Taghoot. Okay, so we mentioned now important points that you need to perhaps write down or know is al-rushd means guidance, al-ghay means misguidance. Al-rushd, when Allah says فَمَن يَكْفِرْ بِالطَّاغُوتِ وَيُؤْمِنْ بِاللَّهِ, yeah, or لَا إِكْرَاهَ فِي الدِّينِ قَدْ تَبَيَّنَ الرُّشْدُ, al-rushd min al-ghay, the wrong path. The wrong path, in fact, the Sahaba, they said, is the deen of Abu Jahl. Deen of Abu Jahl. So now when I'm going to ask this question now, and I don't want to jump straight into it, but if I was to, or if we were to elaborate now, if we to give da'wah now, if I give da'wah now to somebody on this ayah now, I'm going to ask him now, where Allah Azza wa Jal, he said, ar-rushd min al-ghay, the wrong path. The Sahaba said this is the deen of Abu Jahl, so where's Abu Jahl today? If the ayah was regarding this, the Sahaba had understood rejecting the deen of Abu Lahab and Abu Jahl, then where's that path today? Surely I must reject Tawheed today, Taghoot today. Allah said here, Sheikh Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab, he's elaborated here, it's not my own words, it's not something I'm making up, it's what the ulama, they said, that you cannot be a true believer, you cannot be a true mu'min, you're not a Muslim basically, until you make rejection of false gods and believe in Allah Azza wa Jal. And now we're going to elaborate, we're going to go further into knowing what are those false gods. What you want to do is you want to give up false gods. And false gods, we can say, they fall into a classification of four. The first is known as al-alihah. Al-alihah basically means anything that a person, he directs his hope and his fear, believing that it can bring benefit or take away any harm. Yeah? So a good example, for example, or an example of that nowadays could be ta'weez. People put a string around their neck, isn't it? Yeah? Lucky charm, rabbit's foot. I don't know who would put a rabbit's foot around their neck. That's crazy, yeah? But people do that, yeah? So that's the first thing you want to understand. There's four things you need to give up. They are known as al-aliyah, al-andad, al-arbab, and at-taghoot. I'm going to give the evidences for all four. The first three, they're very easy to understand. The fourth one, which is Taghoot, is the most difficult one. You don't need to write the Arabic down. You just need to know at least the term in English and just comprehend the evidence in relation to that. So the first one is anything which you direct your hope and your fear towards. So you're worried that if I don't have this thing around my neck here, then I'm going to have perhaps an accident, or I won't be able to get married. Lucky charms, like people they have, or you put your hope in. Well, okay, what do Indians have a lot? Indians have a lot of these things called money tree within their house. They have this big plant, it goes all the way up. The higher it goes, they believe they're going to get a lot of money. And most of the time, they're all on benefits as well. So they never get anything anyway. But they have this, yeah? The evidence in relation to this is found in Surah Yunus, verse 107. It's Surah Yunus, chapter 10, verse 107. Allah said, if Allah afflicts you with some harm, there is no one who can remove it except Allah. And if He desires good for you, then there is no one who can repel His favor. This ayah, I believe, the best people to understand this ayah nowadays, my dear brothers, are those whose feet are covered with dust. Because they're the ones who truly understand who to put their hope in, who to put their reliance in. You can see, Tawheed, this topic, one day, inshallah, you'll taste the fruits of it. This is not a theoretical subject. This subject will help you in the most difficult time, wherever you go. Wherever you end up tomorrow, you'll remember these terms. If you memorize these terms and the evidence in relation to this, one day you might find yourself in a gloomy situation. You'll look to this verse and you'll think, how on earth can I turn my back from the deen and take up an offer from some kafir, from some Taghoot, maybe to spy on my brothers? When you understand, He's the only one that you should have hope in. He's the only one you should have fear in. He's the only one you should have reliance upon. Allah said, if Allah afflicts you with some harm, there is no one who can remove it except Allah Azza wa Jal. Secondly, al-andad. Al-andad is what you want to give up. So we're giving up now, and we're going to take up next week. Al-andad is whatever draws a person away from obedience to Allah. That could be your family, that could be your children, your wealth, your dwelling. That is known as al-andad. Yeah? Al-andad. Allah said in Surah Baqarah, verse 165, and of mankind there are those who take others besides Allah Azza wa Jal as rivals to Allah, and they love them as they should love Allah Azza wa Jal. Ayah Baqarah 165. Okay, now, for example, you love your wife. Yeah? Okay, you can love your wife, but it must be for the sake of Allah. If you say, I love my wife just as I love Allah, shirk. You commit a shirk. If you say, I love my wife more than Allah Azza wa Jal, you're going outside the fold of Islam. So it can't be anything like that. Okay? So if we understand our relationships are based upon love for Allah's sake, then there'll be no problem. So al-andad, anything which draws you away from from obedience to Allah, makes you disobey Allah Azza wa Jal. Some girlfriend now, for example, come on and let's go in the car, innit? What do you mean let's go in the car? Let's go for a drive. But it's not allowed for me to do that. Obedience. Obviously this is fisq, it's haram. But when this becomes like a way of life and you turn your back completely from the deen. For example, a woman comes to you, let's make it a little bit more specific now. A woman comes to you and she says, it's either Allah or the deen, Allah or me. It's either the deen or me. I can't be married to no Mulvi. It happens with brothers. It's happened with brothers. I know they started practicing. The only obstacle was their girlfriend. The only obstacle was their girlfriend. And then they try, they think one day, you know, she'll wear a scarf and she'll cover up, and he puts a little bandana on her head and he thinks it's working out. It's not really working out, not going anywhere. You know, he's praying and she's laughing at him. He's watching, you know, Sheikh Abu Hamza. She's saying, we go listen to that guy with the hook all the time for. Come, let's go to a cinema, let's go watch Bollywood. There's a clash in it within the home. It's going to end up in a divorce. Either she comes to Deen of Islam or chuck her clothes out the front door. She can go wherever she likes. You ain't going to stay with me. On your way, mate. You know what I mean? So, al-andad. The third is known as al-arbab. Al-arbab is those who give verdicts in opposition to Allah's laws. Yeah? As arbab, lords. Al-arbab is two types. Al-ahbar. Al-ahbar, it is known as the scholars and the rabbis. Nowadays, scholars and rabbis, they have talazum between each other nowadays, sadly. And secondly is known as al-ruhban. Al-ruhban is the priests and the worshippers. Yeah? Any one of those, basically could be anyone from mankind. If he gives a verdict in opposition to Allah's law and you obey him, you have taken something called arbab min dunillah. And this is whenever he takes a scholar in making something halal haram, or haram halal, and then this person, and he follows him, he is taking him as a god besides Allah Azza wa Jal. The evidence for this is Surah Tawbah, chapter 9, verse 31. Allah said, they took their rabbis and priests as arbab bin dunillah, as gods besides Allah Azza wa Jal. Let's look to the asbab al-nuzul of this ayah, the circumstance of revelation of this verse. It just so happened that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was reading this verse, and this is in the Musnad of Imam Ahmed. He was reading this verse, that the Jews and the Christians of the past, they took their rabbis and monks as arbab bin dunillah. They took their rabbis and monks as lords besides Allah Azza wa Jal. As a god besides Allah, as a Lord. And he read the whole of the surah from Tawbah 31 all the way to the end of Surah Tawbah. At that time there was a new Muslim at that time known as Adi ibn Hatim. When Rasulullah finished the surah, the Sahabi, he said, "Oh Rasulullah, how did we worship them? We didn't bow down to them." Because worship in your mind goes to shirk of just going to the grave. And when we say to a brother, Yaki, you can't obey the law of the land, that's shirk. What's that got to do with Tawheed? You can't vote. What's that got to do with Tawheed? Ya Sheikh, you never studied Tawheed. You never studied what is Tawheed. You never studied about Kufr bit-Taghut. What is Arbab, Andad, Al-Aliyah. You need to know this. Otherwise, how are you going to, you're going to end up falling into it. That's why if you just study this topic alone, should be enough for you to be a Muslim. Should be enough for you to stay away from the crime. If I stay away from the crime, I don't do no time. If I don't do no time, I'll get something called Jannah. But if I have this superficial thinking, I just need to study about Allah, but not study about those things which I need to stay away from, which might negate my iman, or take me outside the fold of Islam, or negate my shahada in its totality from the very crux of it, meaning from its pillars, from its arkan, then I never even understood iman. And Allah Azza wa Jalla, you already said in Surah Baqarah 256, that those who reject faith in Taghoot, then they believe in Allah, they've got urwatul wuthqa. They've got the knot of Iman. This knot of Iman does never break. There's nobody that I've met that studied this topic, my dear brothers, yeah, and gone and reverted back from it. But I've met many brothers who just studied Iman in Allah, and then afterwards they discover this topic and they leave whatever manhaj or so-called path they were upon, or hizb or group, or whatever so-called sect that they were following. or Jama'ah they were following and come to the haqq. And that's why you see many people, you don't find brothers who believe in Tawheed, study Tawheed, and then in the end they end up doing shirk. It could happen, but it's usually not the case. If you study this properly and open up your heart, make dua to Allah Azza wa Jalla after the session and even during the session as well. Oh Allah, open up my heart so I can receive the hidayah. This is very nice for us to study, but it could be you go away with nothing. You need to ask Allah Azza wa Jalla for the ilm to penetrate your heart, and so that your limbs can act upon it. Otherwise, this will be hujjah against you on Yawm al-Qiyamah. So it's a very dangerous topic that we're studying. Yeah? And when he read this ayah, excuse me now, we'll go back to the point I was making, that when he read this ayah, then Adi ibn Hatim, he said, we didn't worship them. He said, did they not make halal haram and you obeyed them? Ta'ah. Ta'ah, what was the second part, which Shaykh al-Islam he mentioned? He said, yes. He said, that's how you worship them. So what are you talking about? Obeying somebody can make me become mushrik. Yeah. Now you need to know what is Taghoot now. The meaning of Al Taghoot. Taghoot, as we said, is established from that ayah, Baqarah 256. Yeah? And we said, Al-Urwatul Wuthqa means what? La ilaha illallah. Okay? Let's look to what the Sahaba they said. Abdullah ibn Abbas, Zayd ibn Thabit, Ubay bin Ka'b in Sunan Ad-Darimi, after the discussion of La ilaha illallah, they said, what does La ilaha illallah mean? They mentioned two ayah. They said these two ayahs explain to us everything about La ilaha illallah. And that is chapter 22, verse 62. Verily Allah is haqq, and what they call instead of Him is batil. You see here now? Allah is saying, verily Allah, He is the haqq, and what they call besides Him is batil. Two pillars established again. Meaning, if someone says, there is nothing called two pillars of Tawheed, this is something you and your shaykh made up. It's Allah telling us here in the Quran. Second evidence is chapter 13, verse 14. Allah said, He calls them to the truth, and what they call for is not benefiting them at all. So here, Allah is saying, there's this path and there's this path. False God, true God. What you're calling is falsehood. If you come to this one, it's truthful. Yeah? And we understand that the meaning of the false God is what? Is something that you worship instead of Allah Azza wa Jal. So the key aspect of Tawheed is worship. Allah never sent any messenger to prove Allah exists. No ayah like that. Doesn't mean you don't have that discussion with people. You can use that discussion. When I meet a non-Muslim, I'll discuss that with him and say, look, you know, who is the one who caused man, life, universe to exist? This is to provoke his fitrah to recognize his creator. And that's one of the proofs. When we study Tawheed al-Rububiyyah, we'll study the topic of al-fitrah. And we'll give all the evidences that the fitrah is an evidence to prove that the lordship of Allah Azza wa Jal. Because before any of us were born, before any of us came about, Allah Azza wa Jal, He took from the loins of Adam al-Islam, all of us, and He asked us, who is your Rabb? And what did we all say? Qalu Ballah. He said, indeed, you are our Lord. So this is a hujjah against us. No one can come on Yawm al-Qiyamah and say, I didn't know a God existed. It's already been written in the divine tablet. It's already been recorded. We all testified. And that's why the fitrah is something which we're born upon, natural disposition. You believe in Allah. But it's your parents that make you into a Jew, Christian or fire worshipper. But you don't have excuse on Yawm al-Qiyamah. On Yawm al-Qiyamah, you don't have excuse. Your fitrah is a hujjah against you. That's why, otherwise someone can come on Yawm al-Qiyamah, no one told me about Allah. Can I go to Jannah? No. Did you worship Him? No. You still go to hellfire. The matter is not believing in Allah. Believing in Allah is not the problem. Who did you worship? Otherwise everyone could say, oh, let me just go hide in a mountain. If I hide in a mountain, no one will give me dawah, then I can still go to Jannah. I don't have to do nothing, innit? I can fornicate, I can have drugs, I can do whatever I want, I can have party, rave, do whatever I want, innit? But it's not like that. Allah didn't leave any room for excuse. Yeah? So the key is worship. That's why Allah said, Qul ya ayyuhal kafirun, la a'budu ma ta'budun. Oh you Mr. Kafir. They didn't say Mr. Kafir, I always say Mr. Kafir. Oh you Kafir, listen up. I don't worship what you worship. I don't worship what you worship. The ayah never said, I don't believe in what you believe in. That's why people, they don't understand this ayah. This ayah, when it was revealed, you know, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the asbab al-nuzul and the circumstance of revelation, the Sahaba, they said, Rasulullah, his face turned red, like a tomato when he said this verse. He never said, Qul ya ayyuhal kafirun, la a'budu ma ta'budun. No. Qul ya ayyuhal kafirun. You listen up, Mr. Kafir. I don't worship what you worship. What did Rasulullah do? He affirmed what Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah, he said. I believe in Allah, I submit to Him, I worship Him. I've got nothing to do with you, Mr. Kafir. That's why Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah, he is upon the manhaj of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But many people, they're not on that manhaj at all. They can quote. It's very easy to quote Shaykh Abdul Wahab, Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah. Look to their statements and look to you. Look to how he died and how you died. These people, they died in prisons. These people, they died because they were poisoned. These people died because of stabbings and killings. And how are you dying? How are you living your life? Sacrificing? Oh, don't make fitna, just study Tawheed. Yeah? This is Tawheed. Are we going to do about it now? Nothing. Just put it underneath. We can't study it. It's too much for the people. This is complete hypocrisy, my dear brothers. So Allah is the one who's worshipped, followed, and obeyed, and that is called and that is our Tawheed. And At-Taghoot, when we say At-Taghoot now, At-Taghoot is the one that is followed, obeyed, and worshipped instead of Allah Azza wa Jal. Okay. Umar al-Khattab. Let's go now to the evidences for what is At-Taghoot now. Umar al-Faruq. First statement. He said, At-Taghoot huwa al-Shaytan. Taghoot, it is Shaitan. Who is the worst enemy? Barack Obama or Shaitan? Shaitan, okay? Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah, and this one you can write down. He said, At-Taghoot kullu ma'budin aw matbu'in aw muta'in min dunillah fahuwa Taghoot. Taghoot is kullu al-ma'budin. Anything which is worshipped instead of Allah. Al-ma'budin. Kullu ma'budin aw matbu'in aw muta'in min dunillah. Don't worry about the Arabic too much, but all you need to know is, and you need to know this off by heart. Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah, he said, Taghoot is anything followed, obeyed, and worshipped instead of Allah. Followed, obeyed, and worshipped. No problem. Write it down, no problem. You got a question? Yeah.
You're going to delete this after here. I'm a bit confused here.
Okay.
So, is Tawheed and Taghoot two different things?
Yes. Tawheed is, we say Tawheed, Tawheed consists of two pillars. Tawheed is believing on Allah.
Submission and obedience.
Yes.
That's Tawheed.
Tawheed. Yeah? Or we can say Iman in Allah. Is more accurate to what you just said.
So can you give me like a definition for Tawheed?
Tawheed is the exclusive worship of Allah. Al-ifradullahi bil-ibadah. You don't need to worry about the Arabic too much. That's something that you can study afterwards. But when we talk about Taghoot, Taghoot is something that you must reject before you have that Tawheed. Before you can worship, you need to know who not to worship.
And how would I spell that in English?
Oh, Taghoot, T-A, I've got the notes in front of me. Why am I guessing it for? T-A-G-H-O-U-T.
O-U-T.
Yeah, O-U-T. Don't worry, when the video comes out, it'll have nice graphics and all the definitions will come up on the side and pictures as well. So, that'd be nice for you. Okay, linguistic definition now. So, Taghoot, we say, could be anything followed, obeyed, and worshipped instead of Allah Azza wa Jal. Okay, are you clear on that one, yeah?
Yes.
Just about. Okay, let me explain it a little bit further, yeah? I'll make it a little bit more simple for you. Tawheed, la ilaha illallah is the shahada. Tawheed means we worship Allah, we believe in Allah. But the Tawheed itself, it consists of two parts. Al-kufr bit-Taghoot, imanu billah. To give up false gods, that is called giving up Taghoot. And then believing in Allah is worshipping and submitting to Allah Azza wa Jal. So they both go hand in hand. It's not two separate topics, but they are. What we're doing is we're elaborating two pillars. La ilaha illallah. So traditionally, when people say Tawheed, people usually mean affirming your belief in Allah. What we're saying is no. In fact, Allah told us different. Allah said you can't affirm your belief in Allah until you affirm disbelief in false gods, which is Taghoot. So Taghoot and Tawheed, they both go hand in hand. The two cannot be separated. To say the two separate topics is wrong. To say we're elaborating, all Taghoot is an elaboration for the term Tawheed. You cannot study Tawheed without to know what is Taghoot. And you cannot study what is Taghoot without to know Allah. Allah Azza wa Jal, and there is Taghoot. Allah is the Haqq, and the Taghoot is the falsehood. So we're studying false gods. What is the false god that we need to reject before we worship Allah? Studying about this topic, what we're doing is merely a mechanism in order so that we can fulfill our Tawheed properly. It's like saying, is there a difference between the petrol and the car? Or the steering wheel and the gearbox? They're not two separate topics. They're merely elaborations. One is to steer, to get to the destination, and the one is to change the gears. Right now, we're just putting ourselves into the right gear, first gear, and then we go 190 miles an hour and break the clock, and then worship Allah properly. So it's two pillars that we're studying. So At-Taghoot can be anything. Could be human, could be jinn, could be rock, could be shaitan, could be a law and order, could be a man, could be a woman. Taghoot could be anything. that you worship instead of Allah Azza wa Jal. If we go now to the linguistic definition and Sharia definition of Taghoot, so we're clear. So none of us should go away confused in terms of our understanding of Taghoot. Literally speaking, Taghoot, it comes from the linguistic understanding of Taga. Taga means something which has exceeded its proper bounds. Yeah? And let me give you an evidence for that, for the linguistic meaning of Taghoot. Is Surah Al-Haqqah, chapter 69, verse 11. Surah Al-Haqqah, which is chapter 69, verse 11, Allah said, verily when the water, it rose, it made taga, yeah, beyond its limits, which was the flood of Noah alayhi salam, we carried you, mankind, in the floating ship. Yeah? So Allah is saying, taga, that the water, it rose beyond its limits. So the water is meant to perhaps stay on this ground, and this is, for example, the shore or the seaside. What's happened? The water is risen, obviously with the permission of Allah, but it's made taga. It's gone beyond its bounds. The Sharia definition, however, is not just taga. Because this is the problem now. When you go to other people now and you say, Aki, do you reject Taghoot? Yeah, I don't transgress the bounds. This is not Taghoot. Taghoot is, in the Sharia, anything which exceeds its proper limits, ascribing to himself any of the rights of Allah, making himself a partner with Allah, or you make it a partner with Allah. So it could be something which consents to being worshipped. So if a man, like for example Barack Obama, he says, obey me, that is Taghoot. Yeah? Or someone who obeys him, and or someone says, oh, that should be worshipped, then that is a Taghoot as well. And we'll give evidence for that. That not only is Taghoot now the one that people worship instead of Allah, but even the followers of those Tawheed both go to one place, the hellfire, and both go outside the fold of Islam. More than that, let's give another evidence, which is Surah 679, verse 17. Surah An-Naziyat. Allah said, go to Fir'aun. Allah said to Musa alayhi salam, go to Fir'aun, verily he has made taga. He has transgressed all of the crimes. What was the crime of Fir'aun? Is that he made shirk. And he called people to shirk as well. He said, I am a God. People should obey me. People should worship me. So we mentioned these verses, and we need to put them into our reality now. Where's the Taghoot in our reality? Who is the Taghoot that's being followed, obeyed and worshipped? Who are the people asking us to follow and obey? Or even make dua for him? Is it allowed, for example now, what do you believe Musa alayhi salam would say against someone who said, Ya Aki, have sabr, make dua for Fir'aun, innit? Come on, are you serious? This man transgressed the bounds. Allah said these people, they committed all of the highest crimes, criminals. They committed all of the sins, disbelief. Allah is saying to Fir'aun, go to Fir'aun. He has transgressed, he made taga. People say, yeah, I know he's a Taghoot, but you can't say nothing against him. So so Musa alayhi salam is not example for you. How are you rejecting Taghoot? We need to know how to reject Taghoot. More evidences for the word Taghoot. Hadith in Sahih Muslim. Hadith number 3108. And this is Kitab al-Iman. On the authority of Abdurrahman ibn Samruhi. Abdurrahman bin Samhuri, he said, do not swear by the Taghoot or by your parents. Do not swear. So don't make qasam. You know, people say, I swear on my mom's life. Yeah? Or I swear on my dad's grave. People do that, innit? I swear on my dad's grave, innit? Yeah? And then they say, Wallahi billahi afterwards as well. Come on, man. That's completely wrong. Imam Nawawi, he said, At-Tawagheet, which is the plural of the word Taghoot, is the idols and lords and false deities, and the singular of Tawagheet is Taghoot. Yeah? And more than that, Bukhari, hadith number 6885, 6885, Bukhari. And this is the chapter of Tawheed. So it's Kitab al-Tawheed for Imam Bukhari. On the authority of Abu Hurairah, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, verily the one who follows a Taghoot, he is a Taghoot. The one who follows a Taghoot, he is a Taghoot. And this is also reported in Musnad of Imam Ahmed, hadith number 7392. Again, same narration, same wording as well. Abu Hurairah, he reported Rasulullah saying, the one who follows a Taghoot is a Taghoot. And let me give you now 5 ayat in the Quran where the word Taghoot is mentioned. Chapter 4, verse 51. Allah said, do you not see the Christians who were given the book, but they follow the Taghoot and follow the kufr? Also chapter 4, verse 60. Allah said, they want to arbitrate the Taghoot, and they've been ordered to reject it. Also chapter 4 verse 76. Allah said the believers will fight fi sabilillah, and the kuffar, they will fight for the sake of Taghoot. Also chapter 16 verse 36. Here we go. Now this is the evidence now I was looking for. We sent for every ummah a messenger to ask the people to reject the Taghoot. Also chapter 39 verse 17. You just need to know the reference, and then afterwards you can read the ayah.
17,
yeah, 39 verse 17. Allah said, and those who will have hellfire above them and below them, except those who keep away from the Taghoot, give the good news to my servant, those who hear my sayings and abide by it. Okay, so this is the ayat now. So we've gone through linguistic meaning, Sharia definition, and what Allah said in regards to the Taghoot. Yeah, these are the evidences. What you can appreciate is the ayat are always talking about Taghoot is always directed towards falsehood. It's not towards anything good. Yeah. But now we need to know specifically what is the meaning of a Taghoot. In a book called Meaning of Al Taghoot, or it's an article really, Meaning of Al Taghoot, which is the meaning of Taghoot, by Sheikh Muhammad bin Abdul Wahhab, he gave a comprehensive meaning of what is Taghoot. I'm going to give you some statements now. Two statements. Three statements in fact. One of Sheikh Muhammad bin Abdul Wahhab, you don't need to write this down. One of Imam Malik, and one of Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah of what is Taghoot, and that will finish off with regards to what is Taghoot, and then we'll just go a little bit further and into the classifications of Taghoot. He said, Sheikh Muhammad bin Abdul Wahhab, whoever is worshipped and is pleased with it, or claims to have knowledge, or claims to have some qualities of divinity, such as claiming to have knowledge of the unseen, or deems it permissible to legislate laws in opposition to Allah's laws, then such people are transgressors who have overstepped the limits, and they are Tawagheet. So you see now, Taghoot, my dear brothers, the ulama, when they spoke about it, they never restricted it to one particular thing. They never said the one who just, the people who say, come and bow down to me. That people bang on all day about this Qadri guy, oh, people are kissing his feet, people are doing this and that. What about the other Tawagheet around the world who legislate laws? Because you cannot run away from this topic. As much as you think, oh, it's too much for me, I can't handle it, it's fitna, it's going to make my life difficult. This topic will make your life difficult. But this topic will teach you how you're supposed to make the life of the Tawagheet difficult as well, and how you're supposed to rise up against them. And if you don't rise against them, you don't have proper iman, in fact. And by the end of this topic, I'll give you all of the evidences from the Rasulullah, who's the best example for us. The best example for us to know that we must reject Taghoot. Imam Malik, he said, Taghoot is anything worshipped apart from Allah. And he said that is a general definition, which includes a lot of things. Such as idols, graves, stones, and some inanimate objects. This definition, he said, includes shaitan, the biggest Taghoot, witches, soothsayers, people who claim knowledge of the unseen, those who are pleased with people directing acts of worship to them, and those who legislate, those who make istihlal. Istihlal is to make haram halal. Again, legislation is being brought in. Yeah, he said all of these are Tawagheet, plural of Taghoot, and that every Muslim should disassociate himself from them, from those who worship them. He should disassociate himself from them, and from those who worship them. Alright, you should know it off by heart now, yeah? From that first statement of Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah, that last part which I just read out, which part of his statement does this confirm? Number 3. Yeah, C, yes, part 3. Bara from the shirk and the mushrikeen. Bara from the Taghoot, yeah, and the people who follow those Tawagheet. And more than that now, Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah, the last person I'm going to quote now, he said in his Majmu'ah al-Fatawa, and this is volume 28, page 200. He said, if a person who is worshipped besides Allah does not reject such a status, then he becomes a Taghoot. Okay. People who call themselves Christian, they make shirk. Yeah, they believe Jesus is the son of Allah. Is Jesus now a Taghoot? He's not a Taghoot, because he never consented to that worship. If he consents to that worship and he says, people worship me, then we call him a Taghoot. But he's not. He said the Prophet labeled the idols Tawagheet in a Sahih Hadith, when he said, the one who follows the worshippers of Tawagheet will follow the Tawagheet in the hereafter. The one who, you see how important this topic is now. Just from that statement alone, he said, he's quoting Ibn Taymiyyah, Rasulullah, he said, the one who follows the worshippers of the Tawagheet will follow the Tawagheet in the hereafter. It's so important to reject Taghoot, because if you don't reject Taghoot, you'll be with him in Yawm al-Qiyamah. If you don't rise up against him, you'll be with him in Yawm al-Qiyamah. Where he goes, you go. Taghoot go to the hellfire. And all of the ayat we mentioned indicate that. You follow him, you worship him, you follow his ways, You'll end up in the hellfire with him. He said, the one who is obeyed in transgressing Allah's order, or the one who is obeyed in a matter which is not based upon the guidance, but acceptable to the people. If it contravenes the order of Allah, then he is a Taghoot. For this reason, those people who arbitrate using other than the Quran are called Taghoot. And Allah Azza wa Jal, He called Fir'aun and the people of Ad Taghoot. So therefore, my dear brothers, you can understand that a Taghoot can be an idol, could be a theory, could be a law and order, could be anything. From those, my dear brothers, we understand the Tawheed, they're classified into three. Kullu ma'budin, aw matbu'in, aw muta'in min dunillah. Anything followed, obeyed, and worshipped instead of Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. So let's now write down, or let's study now, those things which are followed, obeyed, and worshipped instead of Allah. Those three. The first thing is that which is worshipped instead of Allah. That which is worshipped instead of Allah is those things that you pray towards, or you make your salah towards. That could be, for example now, monkey, could be cow, could be elephant man with 16 arms and spinning a ring on the finger, lipstick on and all this type of business. Could be a cat, could be a rat, could be a donkey. The people, they say, even my old next door neighbor, not my present one, my old one, he was saying, oh, I was watching a documentary. Wonderful place, India. People, they worship rats. MashaAllah. That's something good, it's something that's praiseworthy. He's fascinated by it. The people, they do that. That is al-ma'bud, the one that you worship instead of Allah. So Taghoot is three types. Anything which is worshipped, number one, al-ma'bud. The secondly, anything which is obeyed, al-muta'a. Al-muta'a is the one that is obeyed. If I obey him, that is called ta'a. Anything obeyed. From those things that you obey, there are two matters. Two types of things that you could obey. Al-muta'a min al-jinn, you could obey the jinn. If you obey the jinn, some people they play around with jinn. Yeah? They could be the kafir jinn, or could be the Muslim jinn. But the second one, which is very hard for people to swallow, in regards to those who you obey, is al-muta'a min al-ins, from the humankind. So those people who you could obey could be from the jinn, or could be from the ins. Could be from the jinn or from the mankind. Jinn one is easy to understand. People, they play around with jinn. But from the humankind, who's from the humankind? From the humankind could be Maulana, Chishti Pishti, yeah, Peer Saab, yeah, Cookie, Coca-Cola, or Cocoa Pops, excuse me, yeah, not Coca-Cola, because next time I drink Coca-Cola, people call me a Taghoot, yeah, King, Maulana, could be MP, could be Prime Minister. I know it's difficult to comprehend. Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah, he said, obeying scholars of leaders where there is disobedience to Allah, that is a Taghoot. The one who's a scholar for a Taghoot, he is a Taghoot as well. So people, they can't swallow the topic, oh, Mufti of Taghoot, he's Taghoot. How can he say that? Rasulullah said himself. The followers of the Tawheed, they are Tawheed. So we're about to work for a Taghoot now. Or to say that I'm his Mufti. Alright, let's put it this way now. To make it easy, and no one can disagree upon this. There's a man here, he calls himself Peer. You think of a name now. Siddiqui Saab. Sorry for anyone called Siddiqui. But anyway, yeah. Come on, we can think of something else now. That's bad, man. I'm thinking of someone I know, you know. I know one brother called Siddiqui, see. He's going to say, like, you're talking about me.
Noor Saab.
Noor Saab, okay. Sorry for anyone called Noor. But anyway, Peer Noor Saab, he says to you, oi, kiss my feet, obey me, worship me, go and sacrifice a sheep on my behalf as well. And he's got someone who's his Mufti. And he says, yeah, you should do that, you know. And you should make dua for him as well. You should make dua that the other people, they're able to worship and obey him properly. And you should do that. And if you don't do that, you're from the Khawarij. What do you call this person? You don't call him a kafir, or you call him mu'min. You call this man's a Taghoot now. He's Mufti of Taghoot. He's working for the Tawheed. This man, you call him a kafir in the first place. One who says, oi, worship my feet. Clean them as well, the little toe as well. Bow down to them. Pray 5 times a day to my feet. And he's got a man who works for him who says, you must worship my feet. You must worship his feet. And if you don't, then you're from the Khawarij. Mufti of Taghoot, he's still a Taghoot. The one who's a follower of the Tawheed, he is a Taghoot. And you'll be with him like that on Yawm al-Qiyamah. The one that you love, Rasulullah said, you'll be with him on Yawm al-Qiyamah like this. So be very careful who you love. That's why you need to study al-wala wal-bara. You need to know who to love, who to hate. You need to study who is a Tawheed. You need to know how your feelings and emotions should be directed. It's not from something I make up from my own pocket. It's from what Allah said, the Messenger said. That's how our feelings and emotions should be. Yeah? So ibadah, we can understand now, is not just bowing down now. Worship is not just praying. worshipping is praying as well as obedience. Ibn Hazm al-Dhahiri, he said, great scholar of Islam, he said, ibadah, it is ittiba and inqiyad. Ibn Hazm, he said, ibadah, it is inqiyad and itba and inqiyad, obeying and following. It is obeying and following. And then he said it could be in two types, obeying and following. Could be, or should be really, al-ifradullahi bil-ibadah bin-nusuk, in the ritual acts, bil-hukmi wa-tashri', and in the ruling and the legislation. So you can see, both go hand in hand. When people talk about tawheed, the tawheed of believing in Allah, worshipping Allah, praying towards Him, and referring to His legislation, by saying, this is a minor, we don't, even though he doesn't rule by the Sharia, we will obey him, that is shirk. Because Taghoot is anything you follow or worship and obey. And obey. Yeah, in terms of his ruling and legislation, if you start to obey somebody else now, is that allowed now? Can you obey the law of the land? Allah said in the ayah, Ya ayyuhan nabi, ittaqillah, wa la tuti'al kafirin wal munafiqeen. Allah Azza wa Jalla said, O Prophet, O Muhammad, do not obey the kafir, do not obey the munafiq. If Allah is telling that to the Rasul, then what about you and me? If we're supposed to follow him, can we obey a kafir then? No. Can we obey someone who's a Taghoot now? We're going to study how the ruler, he's a Taghoot as well, if he doesn't rule and judge by the Sharia. You can't. So, we need to have ta'asi, my dear brothers, to Rasulullah and itba to the Sahaba. So, to obey, my dear brothers, a law which is kufr, or to accept any law which is kufr, then that is something kufr akbar. To obey a law, obeying somebody who doesn't rule by Islam, this person, in the first place, he's Taghoot. To obey that law, that is something kufr akbar, it takes you outside the fold of Islam. The evidence, my dear brothers, can be found in chapter 6, verse 121. Surah Al-An'am. Allah said, do not eat the meat slaughtered, which did not have Allah's name pronounced on it. He said that is fisq. It is sin. But from mankind are the awliya of shaitan, like the Jews and the Christians, the kuffar, who dispute with you by making a dead animal halal by eating it. And if you obey them, then indeed you would have become mushrikeen, or mushrikun, because the awliya of shaitan made halal to you to eat that which Allah has made unlawful for you to eat. And you obeyed them, and you obeyed them. By doing so, you would have worshipped them. What does this verse mean? The ayah is basically talking about an incident which took place where some of the kuffar, the Jews, they started to debate with some of the Muslims over a dead animal. And they said to them, why don't you eat from this dead goat or this dead sheep? Make a lamb doner out of it maybe, yeah? So we have some kebab or some lamb biryani out of it, yeah? And they said, no, this animal has not had Allah's name pronounced over it. And they said, wow. So the one you slaughter with your own name, you say Bismillah, Allahu Akbar, what is it, some type of golden knife? But at the end of the day, who is the one who gives life and takes life? Allah. So this one, which Allah Azza wa Jal has killed with his own golden knife, which Allah Azza wa Jal caused him to die, this sheep to die, that one is haram for you. But the one that you slaughter with your own hand, that one is halal for you. They start to apply their own ration. Then Allah Azza wa Jal, He revealed this verse, that these people, they try to dispute with you about the dead animal. Dead animal is not allowed for us to eat. It must be slaughtered in the name of Allah. A dead sheep, if it's just dead on the floor, we're not allowed to eat from it. They said, but at the end of the day, who is the one who gives life and takes life? At the end of the day. Like people today, they will say exactly the same thing at the end of the day. They say, Yaki, but what can we do though, isn't it? What can we do? We have to obey the law of the land though, isn't it? What if the law of the land, it matches with Islam, is what people they say. They say, if the law of the land, so long as it doesn't contradict the Sharia, we can still obey it. We can still obey it. Isn't that what they were saying? They say, who's the one who gives life and takes life? Allah. So what's the difference? You can obey us, innit? Allah said, if you to obey them, then you would have worshipped them. Worship is not just sacrifice. Worship is not just siyam. It is obedience. Let's look to what the scholars, they said in regards to this, and I will quote to you 1, 2, 3, 4. 3 scholars. 4 scholars in regards to the tafsir of this ayah, and then they should seal it for us. Obeying somebody other than Allah is completely not allowed. Imam Baghawi, he said in volume 3, page 285, he referred to Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah and his Majmu' al-Fatawa. You don't need to write any of this down. Volume 7, page 67. He said, in reference to this ayah, the fact that they were ordered and they obeyed, that is what matters. It is a sin to eat the meat slaughtered in that way. But if they had obeyed them in making halal and haram, and in what they have done, they would have become mushrik just by obedience. Oh my God, but to eat hamburger is haram. Yes. But if a Jew, he tells you to eat that, and he says, come on, why not? Obey me in this matter. And that matter which is haram, you obey him. This is called the shirk of ta'ah, shirk of obedience. Just for one hamburger, I'll become kafir. Yeah. By eating one hamburger doesn't make you become kafir. But obeying somebody where he makes the halal haram or the haram halal, and you obey him in that matter, and he said, yeah, not too bad, innit? That become mushrik. You become mushrik as a result of that. So this is a huge implication for us now. What about the law of the land? It's kufr. Yeah, I don't obey it. What about when I put my seatbelt on? I put my seatbelt on for safety purposes. So I always say to you, put the seatbelt on for safety. Not, oh, because the police are there. I even have to be careful with my words. Oh, it sounds extreme. It's takfiri. So what was Shaykh al-Islam? Shaykh al-Islam, he wasn't takfiri then, as you say? Takfiri what? Yeah, just talk about kufr and shirk you need to stay away from. Yaki, study the basics. This is the basics. Stay away from haram meat. And not obeying a kafir when he said, go on, come and eat it. Why not? Come on, it's halal now. And then Imam Baghawi, he said in volume 2, page 127 now, he said that the mushrikeen tried to make the Muslims follow them. And if they would have followed them, just in this one matter now, my dear brothers, over a lamb, over a bakara, you know, a little goat walking around in the middle of the street, which is dead, they would have become mushrik just by following them. So look at the difference now. First he quoted Imam Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah. He said they would have become mushrik by obedience. Imam Baghawi, he said they would have become mushrik by following them. Obeying and following. Remember Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah now? Still go back to that same statement. We're going to keep going back to that statement. He said the foundation of Islam is what? Submission, obedience. And in bara from the shirk. The Sahaba, they practiced this. They never followed them, they never obeyed them, and they made bara from them. Allah said if you were to follow them, you would become kafir. If you obeyed them, you would become kafir. And if you don't make bara from them and you love them, you still become a kafir. And then Ibn Kathir, he said, volume 2, page 177, in relation to this ayah, if you turn your back from the commandment of Allah, legislated to you, or any other commandment or saying, then this is shirk akbar. And then he quotes the ayah of Surah Tawbah, verse 31, of taking people as arbab min dunillah. Imam Qurtubi, he said in a tafsir of this ayah, volume 7, page 77. He said, Allah says, if you obey them in making the dead meat halal, you become mushrik. Because the mushrik said, what is the difference in us killing the meat or you? As Allah is the one who kills it either way. Allah forbade the dead meat by text, so He accepts that it's permissible to eat it from anybody else. If He accepts to make that meat permissible to eat from anybody else, then he is a mushrik. Imam Ahmed and At-Tirmidhi and Ibn Jarir, in the tafsir of this verse and tafsir of Tawbah 31, they again use the example of Adi ibn Hatim when he went to Rasulullah and then Rasulullah said, did they not make halal haram and haram halal? He said, indeed. He said, that is how you worship them. So the ulama, when they mentioned this verse, which is chapter 6, verse 121, about obeying the kuffar, they went back to the other ayah which we mentioned, Surah Tawbah, verse 31, and they put the two together. That by obeying the kuffar in any matter, whether the scholar he makes haram halal, whether the scholar he makes haram halal, or whether the kafir he makes haram halal, any one of them you obey, then you would become mushrik, you would become kafir, somebody outside the fold of Islam. So then we need to ask now, what do they do inside the parliament now? Inside the parliament, what do? They don't make haram, halal, halal, haram. It's all haram. It's all kufr, it's all shirk. Imam Shafi, he said, we have a principle. Anything that goes against Islam is kufr and shirk. If anything that matches with Islam is still kufr and shirk. You know why? Because it wasn't based upon what Allah and His Messenger they said. It wasn't based. What does that mean? That means tomorrow if they say alcohol is banned, do we say we're going to obey them in that matter? It's still shirk. Because it didn't come from what Allah said and the Messenger said. It's not a matter of following them. It's making sure that you follow the commandments of Allah, but you make sure that when you follow the commandments of Allah, it's out of your obedience to Allah. Otherwise you could be saying, I'm following the commandments of Allah, but I'm obeying the law of the land, still a kafir. Still somebody mushrik. You follow and obey only the commandments of Allah, never associating in either one. You don't say, I follow the kuffar, but obey the law of Allah. No, you follow and obey Allah, never follow and obey anybody. Following and obeying is very, very important. Iyad ibn Musa and Iyad ibn Musa ibn Iyad ibn Amru al-Yahsabi al-Andalusi, he said, regarding Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, someone saying La ilaha illallah is not enough. He said, it is not enough. With regards to what Rasulullah said to Adi ibn Hatim. Yeah, that you worship them by obeying them. He said, saying La ilaha illallah is not enough if he does all the acts of kufr. Yeah, but he says La ilaha illallah by his tongue. He prays, yeah, but he obeyed them in the istihlal. So here we can take that the ulama, they took the issue of ta'ah, obedience, as kufr of obedience, and that is shirk al-ta'ah. And in fact, the issue of ta'ah is mentioned many times within the Quran. Shaykh al-Islam, he quotes Imam Ahmed in his book, Al-Sarim al-Maslul. Al-Sarim al-Maslul, it means the sharp sword. Very good book. Yeah, you can find this online. It's got a picture of a sword on it. Page 38, who reported, and Ibn Taymiyyah is quoting Imam Ahmed. He said, I looked inside the Quran and I found that to obey Allah is mentioned over 33 times. In the Quran, to obey Allah is mentioned over 33 times. And here, let's look to one of those ayat, or two of those ayat. In fact, the first is Surah Ali Imran, verse 100. And this one is what we can call it our sword now.
33 times ayah obedience, yeah?
Obedience, yeah. 33 times Imam Ahmed, he said, inside the Quran. He found that to obey the kuffar, obey the kuffar, obey Allah is mentioned 33 times. Okay, now let's look to one of these ayahs. You can call this the ayah of, or the sword of takfir. Surah Ali Imran, verse 100. Allah said, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu in tuti'u fariqan min alladhina utu al-kitaba yardukum ba'da imanakum kafirin. Allah Azza wa Jalla said in Surah Ali Imran, verse 100, if you were to obey Ahl Kitab, if you were to obey the people of the book, they will make you become kafir. What? They will obey the people of the book. They make you become kafir. Yes. And here, a very important fact to mention, in fact. Allah Azza wa Jalla, when He speaks about the kuffar in the Quran, He mentions them as either Ahl Kitab or Yahud wal Nasara. When He says Yahud wal Nasara, Allah is expressing His displeasure at those mushrikeen. When He says Ahl Kitab, Allah is praising them. So here Allah is saying, if you were to obey, if you were to obey Ahl Kitab, He's praising them, you would have become kafir. But Ahl Kitab, the Ahl Kitab law. Our women can now marry. This fatwa, people are discussing now, this fatwa is going to come out soon, where our sisters are going to be allowed to marry Jews and Christians inside this country. It's coming, believe it or not. It's coming soon. It's already been passed in other countries. It's already been passed in, I forget the country now. But there's already a fatwa there, and it was Qaradawi, he said, a Muslimah, she can be married to a Jew for the sake of dawah. And now they want to pass the fatwa here, and they want to use the excuse to say that because there's a lack of men, and the Muslim women are finding it hard, they need mahram, so for the sake of maslahah, benefit, they can get married to a Jew. For the sake of maslahah, you can commit zina. For the sake of maslahah, you can go to a nightclub. You know what I mean? I can't sleep at night. Maybe I can go to a nightclub and help me, put me to bed. I can drink in it. Why not? I feel I've got depression. Can I drink? Okay, no problem. Everything become halal for you. Yeah? Imam Shafi, he said in relation to this ayah, the ta'ah, obedience in any matter, is where the kuffar say something is halal and Islam says is haram, you cannot obey them. Also, Surah Ali Imran, verse 149. Verse 149, Allah Azza wa Jalla said, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu in tuti'u alladhina kafaru yaradukum ala aqabikum fatanqalibu khasirin. Allah Azza wa Jalla said, if you were to obey the kafir, they will make you become apostate and they will make you be one of the losers. If you were to obey the kafir, they will make you become apostate and you will be one of the losers. It's not in my notes, but it's just come to my mind. You know the circumstance of revelation, what the Rasulullah said about this verse? When this verse was revealed, where Allah said, if you were to obey the kafir, they'll make you become apostate and you will be from amongst those losers, Rasulullah said the very famous statement. He said, I'm free from the one who chooses to live amongst the mushrikeen. I'm free from the one who chooses to live amongst the mushrikeen. Imam Tabari, he said, they will make you become apostate means that you will become murtad by obeying them. Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, he said in his Majmu' al-Fatawa, volume 28, page 191, he said, a person who is obeyed in matters which are not accepted by Allah, and the person who is obeyed in other than the guidance of Allah, he is a Taghoot. Whether you accept him in the news, in the akhbar, which contradicts Allah's news in the akhbar, or if you obey his orders which are in opposition to Allah's laws, then he is a Taghoot. That is why a person taken as a judge between believers and his ruling with other than Allah's law is called in the book of Allah a Taghoot. Do you know what Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah, he's in fact said with this statement? What he's done in fact is, he's divided, he's spoken about the Qur'an, he's spoken about the whole of the Qur'an. The whole of the Qur'an is divided into three: Amr, Nahi and Akbar. Every ayah of the Qur'an, it falls into one of these. Either it's command to do, command not to do, or information for us. So Allah says, establish the salah. Yeah? So it's Amr. Yeah? Allah is saying, stay away from the alcohol. Nahi. Don't do. In Urdu they say that, nahi. Or in Punjabi say, hey. I don't know what to say in other languages. Anyway, yeah. Or Akbar, information. Akbar, information. Allah has told you about Yawmul Qiyamah. He's told you about the Qasas al-Anbiya. So here he's saying here, whether you accept them in the news, or if you obey them in laws, in any of those matters where Allah said this is good, or this is bad, or this is allowed, this is not allowed, you become mushrik by obeying them. So, what have we just covered there? We just covered, my dear brothers, in regards to the Tawheed, the Taghoot of obedience, or the Taghoot of those things which you obey instead of Allah. Now the third one which we need to study is anything which you follow instead of Allah. Al-Matbu. Al-Matbu is what you follow instead of Allah. So the first one, what was the first one? You can look at your notes and tell me. What was the first type of Taghoot? The one we talk about the following and obeying. So we spoke about worshipping first, yeah? Then we spoke about obeying somebody. That's a Taghoot as well, yeah? And now we're talking about the third one, which is following. Al-Matbu, yeah. So he said, let me just remind myself as well. Anything Al-Ma'bud, anything Muta'a, and anything Al-Matbu. So we mentioned now Al-Ma'bud is the one that's worshipped. Anything Muta'a is the one which is obeyed. And now, anything which you follow is Al-Matbu. Can you imagine somebody, you know, from in Somalia or in Afghanistan studying this subject? They'll probably become radicalized, you know, after they study this. Yeah. So, okay. Right, good. All right. I was looking at this, my next page of my notes, and thinking, why is it talking about the definition of Tawheed? We already studied that. That's because last page now. Yeah, in 10 minutes, yeah. Okay, we'll finish it here on this one, exactly, on this one now, yeah? Okay, anything followed in instead of Allah, we got 5 examples. The first example is known as Al-Nakira. Al-Nakira is the empty mind, where people, they follow their own mind. I think, I feel, Allah said pray, yeah, but I think we shouldn't pray.
So, rational, basically.
Yeah, you can call it the... Yeah, Al-Nakira is the empty mind. The ration is the next one, known as Al-Hawa. That's more accurate. Al-Hawa is the rational desires. Yeah? Al-Nakira, the empty mind, is where people, they say, you know, I don't believe in anything, innit? Atheism. Yeah? So if you follow the idea of atheism, obviously that's an idea of the Tawheed. Al-Hawa, which is rational desires. So this one is more accurate in regards to your own desires. Al-Hawa, rational desires. Number 3 is satanic theories. In Egypt, they have a group called Hizbul Shaitan, and they got 50,000 members. The people, they worship the Shaitan. It's an active group right now in Egypt. They have this, yeah.
What's the Arabic term for that?
I don't have the Arabic for this one. Following the Shaitan. Ahl Shaitan. You can call it Ahl Shaitan. The people of Shaitan, or the ideas from the Shayateen. Any satanic ideas, devil worship, anything like that, yeah? Number 4 is the rulers and MPs. Those people who legislate laws. MPs in the parliament, anything like that. And number 5, and it's probably the most dangerous one, which is Zandaka, false ideas. Zandaka is basically where I take kufr and I package it in the name of Islam and I tell you to do it. So I give Zandaka, or the one who does it singular, is known as Zandiq. The worst type of Zandiq nowadays, or one of the worst type of Zandiq nowadays, is the Ahmadiyya, Qadiani. What do they say? They say we believe in another prophet, but we say La ilaha illallah. They believe in Islam, they say we believe in Islam, and they promote their kufr. We don't believe in any other prophet after Rasulullah. Yeah? They promote that in the name of Islam. This is Zandaka. This is the worst type of kufr that anyone he can do.
Is that following?
Following false ideas. A false idea. But it's more than that. More accurate is a false idea but in the name of Islam. So someone says, for example, what are you talking about? Allah said, have brotherhood amongst yourself. Basically, this means alcohol is allowed. Huh? Yeah, how you can have brotherhood without alcohol? You need something to bring people together, innit? You see? Or another Nabi, yeah? Zandaka. Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, he said in his Majmu' al-Fatawa, volume 28, page 524, whoever follows a deen other than Islam and follows a Sharia other than that of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then he has become a kafir. Yeah? And how nowadays people then want to uphold democracy then? Because all of these ideas that we just mentioned, empty mind, rational desires, satanic theories, rulers, MPs, al-Zandaka, is exactly what democracy is. Democracy is where all of the immorality stems from. Democracy is, as they say, the law of the people, by the people, follow the people, for the people. You're following, obeying, submitting all of the ideas which are complete zandiq, satanic ideas, all of the ideas which come from people's own ration. And that's why we say democracy is completely 360 degrees away from Islam. Nothing called shurocracy. Just because you change the name of it doesn't make it allowed. And if you I just give you 4 elements of democracy which will help you in your da'wah, you'll begin to understand why democracy itself is exactly what we're talking about. Taghoot is a system of Taghoot. Why? Because no democracy can exist without the following 4. Number 1 is hurriyat ad-diniyah, the freedom of religion. Allah says the only religion acceptable to Allah is al-Islam. Hurriyat ad-diniyah, the freedom of religion, contradicts Islam. Number 2, the freedom of ownership contradicts Islam. Number 3, hurriyat at-shaksiyah, personal freedom. Personal freedom, I can become gay, can become lesbian, contradicts Islam. Number 4 is freedom of expression. So I'll mention them again. Freedom of religion, freedom of ownership, personal freedom, and freedom of expression. That is all, my dear brothers, democracy. Democracy is a system of the Tawheed. Anybody who promotes that, then he has committed kufr. Anybody who wants people to make legislation, which is part and parcel of democracy, then that is kufr akbar. Yeah, and anybody who promotes voting, well, likewise, they fall into the same category. Let me finish with one statement of Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, and that will finish our first part of studies. Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, he said, hypocrisy will be affirmed and iman negated by just turning your back to the ayat, or to make rad on any or any hukum that Allah and His Messenger have legislated, to make your rad, to affirm. He said to affirm, hypocrisy will be affirmed and iman negated by just turning your back to the ayat or any hukum that Allah and His Messenger have legislated. He said the one who comments over or turns back upon the hukum is making halal haram and vice versa. And he said this is kufr buwa. Kufr buwa is what Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said in one of his very famous hadith, he said, obey the leader until you see kufr buwa. And when you see kufr buwa, he said, strike his neck. You rise against him. Clear cut kufr. Kufr buwa is like the sun in the middle of the sky. Clear cut kufr. Like no one could say, for example, the man is making dua to a person in the grave, and he's saying it loudly, and he's saying, oh, the one inside the grave, help me. You can't say this person, yeah, oh no, he's really, he's making dua for his uncle, to have a good life. No, he's making dua to his uncle, that his uncle can perhaps help him. He said this is kufr buwa. Anybody who who affirms any hukum which contradicts the Sharia. We'll finish it there. We have 2 other parts of our topic. Next part of our topic is we're going to go further into our studies of Taghoot, and we're going to study what are the heads of the Tawheed. What are the heads of Taghoot? And we mentioned already now that anything followed, obeyed and worshipped is the 3 categories of Taghoot. But there's many different types of Tawheed now. So I'm going to ask everyone now, give me one example of Taghoot.
The Prime Minister.
Okay. Give me an example of Taghoot.
Al-Ma'bud.
Very good. So accurate. You?
Saucer.
Yeah.
Those who claim to know the animals.
Jinn. Okay, yeah. So any of these can be Tawheed. Alright? So we understand that now, we're clear on that. But what we want to study now is from amongst those Tawheed, because there's many different types, what are the top 5 that I need to stay away from? Like if I told you there's 10 diseases out there, HIV, and there's I don't know, Other types of diseases you can get, in all different parts of your body. Flu, in your foot and mouth disease, mad cow disease. I don't know what this mad cow disease is about. But what's the top 5 that I need to stay away from? Me as a Muslim, which one do I need to stay away from? We'll refer to Sheikh Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab in his book Meaning of Al Taghoot, and we will study the top 5 heads of Taghoot, inshallah. Wa sallallahu sayyidina Muhammad wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Jazakumullah.